Os poderosos podem matar uma, duas ou três rosas, mas jamais conseguirão deter a chegada da primavera. E a nossa luta é em busca da primavera.
Welcome to the Michael Brooks Show. We're broadcasting live. It's a Saturday TMBS, where we say that our fight is in search for spring with super producer Matt Leck.
Yo.
Chief economist David Griscom.
How's it going?
Pretty good. On this week's program, we've got Ahmed Kaballo. He is a journalist and filmmaker based in London from the Sudan. We're talking about ongoing U.S. coup efforts in Venezuela, in Nicaragua, what happened in Bolivia. The Julian Assange trial is ongoing, and his trial presents a global threat to freedom of the press and journalism. We need to talk about it, and we will with Ahmed. Then Isiah James, he's running for Congress in Brooklyn on a real program about housing justice, about the police military occupation of communities of color in this nation, and a whole lot more. He's here. And then in the post-game, Napoleon the Legend is here. We're going to be debunking with Bren Burgess. We're going to be talking about what not only is the Bernie bro myth a lie that can't be indulged, but it is top-down class warfare that must be confronted. In the main show, we have a strategy for stopping the onslaught and for beating Sleepy Joe Biden so we could still save American democracy and deliver the basics of life with Bernie Sanders. We've got a gem. What do we have on the gem docket?
Oh, we're talking about Sleepy Joe's trade record.
Sleepy Joe's trade record. We should be talking about that a lot, folks, as we head into Michigan. And we also understand the dire state of our world. All that and much, much more tomorrow at Think Tank. Wednesday, we're back on TMBS. Soon we'll be back to normal schedule, but Tuesday is another primary, obviously, the vital Michigan primary. Wednesday, we're going to be chopping it up with the indispensable, the God, Adolph Reed, and the very good Liz Franzik of TrueAnon as well. But first, let's get to it. Where are we in the state of the race right now, and what needs to happen next? We got here for a couple of reasons. Every candidate on that stage was attacking Bernie Sanders, the movement, the establishment, including cable television, which function as super PACs against the Sanders campaign and the working class of this country, aggressively coalesced. President Obama, completing his arc of portrayal of young people in this country, aggressively worked to consolidate the right-wing corporate sector of the Democratic Party to block Bernie Sanders, and by extension, let's be really explicit, you having health care, you having student loan relief, you having housing, you having basic decency. Elizabeth Warren, we'll talk about more later, but regardless of whatever story you want to tell about her, has functionally and in terms of reality worked as a wrecker campaign. That's reality. That's how it's worked. If Bernie Sanders was sitting at around 9-10%, and primarily complaining about Warren being negative while she was the lead candidate, no one would have any trouble recognizing what the dynamic was. The shoe's on the other foot. There's a lot of obscuring, a lot of delusion, and a lot of nonsense, but it is what it is. We should have owned the frontrunner status when we had it, and it required a juxtaposition, a challenging synthesis. The reality is that a lot of Democratic voters, including the voters that are showing up, because the new coalition is not showing up, that's reality. That part of the Sanders plan is failing. So a lot of upper middle class suburban voters are showing up, and a lot of other members of the Democratic Party across the spectrum, geographically and in terms of racial background, who have more conservative politics. And this shouldn't have been a surprise to any of us. It is a different dynamic. When Donald Trump took on the Republican Party in 2016, he took a party that is run in terms of money and establishment at the end of the day by corporations and oligarchs, and has a base that has serious material concerns like anyone else, and also is rooted in xenophobia and white identity politics to a very large extent. And he had a very easy job. We hate the Republican elites. We hate the Democratic elites. We hate the media. And we also are going to be very persuaded by a deeply xenophobic program. He gave it to them. Bernie had a tougher thread to needle, has a tougher thread to needle. He needs to fundamentally say, actually, for the parts of the Democratic Party that represent actual human working class people who have real serious, urgent material concerns, he represents them. Doesn't mean that every single person from a working class or poor background is going to vote for him, but a lot of them are. And that's what his agenda represents. That's what his agenda is about. And his agenda is also predicated on the idea that the only way of dealing with Trump and Trump-like things is to get America out of this state of absolute barbarism and cruelty that it has been in for decades under Republicans and Democrats. He needs to synthesize that with actually telling the suburban types, I know you crave moderation. I know you crave normalcy. And the only way you're going to get anything approximating that is actually through some real reform. That's the needle that he needs to thread. And he also needs to say, and in no uncertain terms, and we'll get to it in a moment, Joe Biden is not going to run against Donald Trump. Let's be real. That's not a real race. The Democratic Party has coalesced with more efficacy, more strategy, more coherence, and more energy to stop you having health care than anything they've done in decades. Be very clear about that. And the Bernie campaign from the beginning did an incredible job on organizing, put forward some fantastic policies, but lost some of the simplicity and clarity. They overcorrected from 2016. And there was an unwillingness, and maybe this goes to the candidate himself, to clearly differentiate with Warren in the beginning and frankly, aggressively go to an attack against Biden for several months. I will note, for folks, though, who are dead enders defending Warren, Sanders was actually choreographing a Social Security attack on Biden before the first primaries, right when Warren did her first smear campaign. So let's be real about that momentum as well. But the Sanders campaign has needed to do a hell of a lot more, both in terms of attacking and being clear about its opponents, whether they're Warren or Biden or anybody else, and actually playing the game of, at least trying to get Jim Clyburn's endorsement, even though we know it's not coming. But that's the game. Maybe he could have been convinced to not endorse, and that might have helped in South Carolina. Now, here is the good. We took California. That was the main prize. There was overwhelming dominance with Hispanic people and working class people. That's the future. That's the core in many, many respects. Does it need to continue to grow out? Does it need to include older African-American voters, some suburban voters, and does it need to reclaim some rural voters? 100%. But there is some key indicators here along incredibly important groups of people in this country who are growing and having their actual concerns spoken to in an unprecedented way. They turned out for Sanders, and he won the most important state, California. The coalition we're building with youth, working class people, is massive. And that movement has implications for the future. A whole lot of them have not had their say yet of this vital coalition, including in crucial Midwest states, where it will be key for not only Bernie Sanders to stop the Democratic machine, but for him to defeat Donald Trump. There is an establishment, and they represent 1% class interests, and we have to beat them. People talk about corruption or cheating when it comes to Sanders, and there's instances of that. But what is most important is the absolute refusal of the Democratic establishment and its mouthpieces that trickle out of it to remotely entertain the idea of the Sanders candidacy and, by extension, any working class or poor people's agenda. Establishment Democrats love to talk about the bright future when the youth take over. But when America becomes majority minority, meanwhile, they squash and destroy and undermine those voices every chance they get. We've got a lot of fighting left to do. We need to be strategic and smart. We always need to look for ways to grow. We need to be firm in what we cannot accept. This movement has ignited a fire in so many because it's different, because it cut through the corporate bullshit, woke speak, and of tinkering with economic systems, instead fundamentally challenging them. There's a huge difference between our movement and the Democratic Party, Our ideas need to win. That means a lot of people need to get way more serious. This isn't a club. It's not a cultural movement. It's not a cult. It's a real political movement that's based on empowering the powerless, not out of sympathy, but out of solidarity. Liberals are trotting out the same old lines about unity they've put forward for years. In 1996, Adolf Reed wrote about liberals the following that I'll conclude this commentary with. The propensity for aestheticizing other people's oppression and calling that activism, their reflex to wring their hands and look constipated in the face of conflict, and most of all, their spinelessness and independability in crisis. It's just as true now, and we cannot allow this empty democratic, it is just as true now, and we cannot allow an empty democratic politics to continue because it is fundamentally ill-equipped and opposed to us in the fight ahead. Entertain for a moment as we continue playing this ridiculous game with Elizabeth Warren. Her supporters, her surrogates, folks that are part of it, who have endorsed Bernie, that's great. We welcome you. It's beautiful. I'll do the usual disclaimer that some people apparently need to hear, although it should be obvious. Could you imagine if Gandhi, after a meeting of the Indian National Congress, someone sent him a telegram about the next state of action against the British Empire, and he wrote a telegram back that instead of the Salt March, he was just like, after not having my lived experience honored at the last meeting, that's Mandela. My lived experience was not, yeah, it works too. Steve Biko was very rude, so P.T. Botha has a point. You know, yes, the apartheid security services murdering us is bad, but also me not being respected all the time in exactly the way I want, or getting every single thing I want in ANC internal deliberations, also bad. So, we'll see. Apartheid government, ANC. I have to check in with my own lived experience right now. Or Gandhi, I think. I was not, no, Gandhi telegrams back like, hey, thanks for reaching out. Super appreciate it. I'm totally not in a space mentally or spiritually or emotionally where I can take on this question right now. The awe-inspiring narcissism and entitlement should be evident. If it's not, it's not. But I can't sugarcoat this stuff because this actually, I mean, immediately has huge implications for the planet, but it also speaks to some folks want us to just jettison liberalism. That's not a realistic look at the political environment. You know, that's not reality. Just as woke speak has nothing to do with most people across the board, we're not going to go out and get some of these anxious suburban voters by even talking about very important things like defending Castro or something, okay? That's not what we're going to do. You watch TMBS, you read, you have a long-term education project, of course. But there are folks in positions of some power in very small circles who have some information brokering power, and they are in a historical, critical moment, starting with Elizabeth Warren herself, using like self-care language after a breakup or something. And not only is it like embarrassing and disgusting, it speaks to a broader attitude, which is always going to be fundamentally antithetical to class politics. Period. And I hate like fetishizing and romanticizing of anybody. And like people of all backgrounds can be great individuals. People of all backgrounds can be assholes, and most people of all backgrounds are, of course, complicated, difficult creatures, as all humans are, right? But like, so it's not to say you can meet somebody who's super privileged and well off, who's nicer to deal with than somebody who's poor, but there is going to be, almost no poor person, nobody working. They can't say, oh, I don't know if it's more like I'm physically violently ill and I have to go drive Uber because my family will get evicted. It's not like, I'm going to check in with myself about that. And for people who've insisted endlessly, and again, it doesn't matter. Yes, Elizabeth Warren's a careerist and she's pissed off that she didn't get what she wanted. That's 99.999% of politicians. That's Joe Biden. That's Paul Ryan. That's what these people are. They're careerists, and they're trying to get to the highest point of the meritocracy. Bernie Sanders is a different type of person. There's no doubt about that. There's a reason he fought in the margins for 40 years. Now, on the other hand, he's a stubborn old goat who won't fucking, he keeps calling Joe Biden his friend, says Joe Biden can win. I think that's a fucking disaster. So I'm not saying that there aren't criticisms of Bernie Sanders, but he is the only one in this bracket of field who's cares about this stuff on a kind of fun, elemental level. Everything else is transactional for all these folks, including Warren. And what's disturbing is that folks don't see that. People, I'll be even more provocative. A lot of my irritation is not really with her, it's with you. If you fall into that bracket. It's great. She wants to be president. Cool. A lot of ambitious, smart people want to be president. Great. But you can't fall for, you got to look at the pattern of what's happened here. And, it's a real tactical question that I'm not sure of, right? In the last couple of days, were you in a Hail Mary pass going to suck up to Warren and even offer her VP, which would be a terrible idea in a general election because, again, as never gets acknowledged in these conversations, she doesn't have that many votes. Or do you actually start to consistently and clearly say, and not just leave it to, people on Twitter, this person doesn't share our political project and has run a very unhelpful campaign if your goal is left-wing politics of any sort, not to settle accounts or attack or all, but just literally, again, it's another political question. How about you dilute somebody's brand who's harming you? This is politics. This isn't like some movie where, and then all of a sudden the call comes through and there's Elizabeth. It's transactional. It's politics. And, and everybody's got their, some people really look at on a much, 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 much grander scale. That was Obama. That was very hard for people to recognize. Yes, there's a million other factors with Obama. There's the racism. There's the historical nature of his candidacy. There's the fact that he's unparalleled in personal charisma. There's the fact that he and his family were attacked relentlessly by the worst forces in our society on a minute-by-minute basis. And then there was just the other fact that the guy is a fucking conduit of Wall Street in Silicon Valley. That's it. There's nothing to figure out there. Those are his politics. And I think that's the tendency that concerns me most, is the inability to just, do some balls and strikes. Anyways, guys, I'm sorry I've been ranting. We have a few other things to get to, but please jump in.
I mean, we're sitting here in this moment where the lines couldn't be clearer that we're facing climate devastation. We're seeing a working class that is just being devastated, and people are really looking for answers and something different. And then at the same time, a lot of people are very frightened and they're scared and they don't know where to go. And the kind of narcissism that we've been seeing from the elites in this country, including people like Elizabeth Warren, to realize the importance of the moment and why this is not a time to spread bullshit and lies and nonsense like they've been doing. I mean, this whole Bernie bro thing, that there's been, oh my God, there's been so much toxicity online, is a prime example of that.
It's just because, and just to interrupt quickly, it's just because they can't run what they ran on Corbyn. Like that, the Bernie bro thing is the closest they can do to what they did to Corbyn.
I think it's exactly that, and it makes it even clearer how stupid it is, right? It's like, okay, there's a bunch of people who are saying, hey, I don't think it's right that in a country like the United States, people should be rationing insulin. Hey, I don't think that it's right that we're facing a massive pandemic like coronavirus, and people are afraid to get those tests because they're being charged $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 to get those tests done. And wait a second, it doesn't make sense to have a private healthcare system anymore. And to say that those people, because people are passionate about that and upset about it, it's just like, I guess what really frustrates me the most about it is it's just a complete failure to be able to see injustices or pain and suffering. In the sense that, like, you know what? It does suck when I'm on Twitter and someone says, hey, you're a noob, or you suck, or you're a moron, right? But what's even worse? Burying my mother because they can't, afford health insurance. Seeing people in Yemen being bombed by the U.S. empire. I'm sorry. It's just like, we need to have scales for these kinds of things. And it's absolutely
I have a person
ridiculous.
very close to me right now. you know, I got to be really careful about this because I think privacy is a very good thing. But it's like something very close to me that, thank God, and this would not have been a case until very recently, and I'm sorry to interrupt, that like they would be homeless. They'd be homeless if if there wasn't a context to kick in. And really recently it would have been the case where that just would have happened because all of us were totally broke. There would be no way of helping. And I'm fielding these calls on the same day that this candidate is turning a pivotal week in the election and something she's already played no helpful role into a personal drama piece on cable. And people are bombarding, us with lectures on it's not just like, oh, I'm a bro. I'm telling you, it's disgusting. It's profoundly immoral in a world where there is actually a lot of gray. And there is again, I say all the time, people make mistakes, and I get people have their own experiences, mediate them. But to sit back in this sort of situation and do personal narcissism is...
Yeah, I mean,
that's up there.
That's idea
fucking disgusting.
That it's Bernie, I've seen people like Bernie bros need to use this moment to reflect. Like the people that need to use this moment to reflect are the professional and academic class liberals who this permanently discredits. Because at this moment, right. I mean, I mentioned this on Majority Report, but imagine 8 years ago that this exact scenario that just happened this past week played out, which is that Bernie Sanders is neck and neck with delegates with Joe Biden. And Elizabeth Warren has an endorsement to make, and she's going to go talk with Rachel Maddow about that. And those progressives, the progressive, whatever we call them. And that's what they did. They disciplined the hoi polloi instead of actually saying, you know what, we need to beat Joe Biden. We can put actual progressive, a generational progressive into the White House.
No, instead of just like
those two people.
I had someone looking at Twitter. And I mean, could you, and again, let's do, I'm sorry, I'll do my fucking super basic stand-up bit, right? Like, Bernie Sanders polls at 9%, doesn't accomplish anything, spends the last month doing, saying, she told me I couldn't run because I'm a Jew, but I don't want to talk about it. Then finally drops out after being devastatingly unhelpful. Everyone would be like, you going to endorse Warren now? You going to endorse Warren now? It's neck and neck. She's got a shot. I think I'm going to go on Rachel Maddow and say that, people call me old on Twitter.
And Joe's been pretty nice to me.
Joe's been pretty nice to me. And you know what's amazing about that bit is that, one, we all know that if Bernie did that, everybody would just, pile on him, including people like us, frankly.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And secondly, here's the thing. Other than a couple of just, randos who have actually convinced themselves whatever, their brains are just completely turned to mush. Is there anybody in this universe that is vaguely cognizant that could say with any kind of remote credibility that they could even picture Bernie Sanders doing that? Bernie Sanders would have dropped out of New Hampshire and he would have endorsed Elizabeth Warren. No question, no doubt, no anything. And we all know that. And pretending otherwise is, again, it's not just that it's a personal grievance about a campaign. It's the type of fictitious, delusional, dishonest thinking that's going to keep us from the actual analysis that we need to have to move forward.
I just sometimes when I see it, I've been trying to sit back and think about it because I'm just mad. I mean, I'll just be honest about it. I'm just pissed. I've been watching, especially this past 2 weeks, the kind of scolding that we've seen. It's like, oh, now you're going to learn your lesson. I mean, to just think that we really are in this crisis moment when it comes to climate change, that some people are actually getting pleasure right now.
No, Bernie, yeah, right. No, it's haha, yeah. And it was what do you mean? Because people like us are going to be bummed because we actually took this election seriously? Yeah. Or what about the people who aren't going to get their insulin? Or actually, I was about to say island nations that would flood, but none of these people care about foreign policy. Exactly. So my bad. I shouldn't mention
By the way,
that.
Which is something that also fills me with rage. And I mean, fundamentally, here's the reality. It's you should be mad. And, anger is a perfect reaction to the injustice of this world that we were born into. I mean, it's absolutely right and just for people to be angry and to want to do something about it.
And politicians are like the perfect object of anger, actually, like that we've created in society.
Because that was the point that I want to make. You know what? The reality is it's not that Bernie bros, by the way, I also reject the whole premise, but let's even just say that it's like a thing that's happening.
If it's a thing that's happening, it's good. Bernie bros are good.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Is like,
Bernie
you know,
bros.
is it hordes of people wandering around the streets, like threatening people and attacking them? It's like, no, these are people reacting to politicians, the most powerful people in one of the most powerful country in the world, people in the media who make millions of dollars to spread propaganda for politicians, the most powerful people in the most powerful country in the world, and they are getting challenged by regular people who are just struggling to get by. I'm sorry, I do not see the equivalency here, why that is something that negates an entire movement trying to make a more just world. I'm sorry.
Well, like, again, rejecting other things. No, I'm sorry. I understand there are other verticals and axes of power, and there's relative trade-offs, no doubt. If you're impoverished and you're a woman of color, that adds a whole other layer of burdens than if you're a straight man. I totally accept that. But you do not call anybody who is poor or working in this country, whatever their sex is, you don't call that person privileged. You don't call like this kind of toxic, delusional bullshit that can be weaponized to attack any kind of underclass movement is it's gone. It's gone. It's gone.
Protect Joe Biden.
If you were in deindustrialized America dealing with an opioid crisis, you can be named Bob Smith and have never had a single gender fluid thought in your life, and you're straight and you're privileged and blah, blah, blah. If you're in foreclosure, if you're dealing with that, you're not privileged. Full stop. Done. No more nonsense. That's how you can actually use a rhetoric of like, oh, well, I was inconvenienced on Twitter. And so when you really think about it, it's all the same. I mean, obviously you not being able to get insulin or us having a coup in Bolivia, that's, it's on a spectrum. I mean, it's this just grotesque flattening of reality that only empowers upper class narcissism. And it's utterly ridiculous. And it's, again, just for a second, Bernie, like, I don't know, this was pretty mean to me. I don't know. We all know he would not do that. And the only reason, and look, of course, it does matter. It matters. It matters he's a better person than his opponents. But it also matters that it's an extension of, like you're spitting, like, okay, you don't like, I don't know, you don't like us or Chapo or whatever. Wow, okay, very deep of you. We probably don't like you either. But I'm actually thinking, and part of the reason I get mad at Bernie for not attacking is I'm literally thinking of like, yeah, there was somebody who works in an Amazon warehouse who figured out how to give this campaign $15. There are people losing their, like, and if that's not in the center of your mind, then you shouldn't be doing this. Go do something else. All right. You know what? We'll get to this Biden thing later because we're running late for our guests, but let's just do a little pitch. We're way off, but we'll get to the shout out and this little Biden argument later. We will talk about how he beat Sleepy Joe. Don't worry.
Why? You're getting nervous, man.
You know what I love is that he could be speaking to all of us. Like, yeah, the idea of Joe Biden running against Donald Trump is making me nervous, man.
You know what I love is that he was actually being honest when he said this.
Did a hell of a job of your job.
I don't know. That might be a whole other thing we interrogate with Liz Franzik. The whole, like, everything is justified because of one agency. But anyway, folks, we need you to become a patron at patreon.com/TMBS. We're building out some of what we do. We're looking for our own space. That's very important. And that requires a lot to set up. But we need to be able to have a steady schedule. We need to be able to do some more things that we're working on doing, including there's going to be one thing that is not, that's TMBS adjunct. It's not the same. It's a different lane, but it's going to have some very interesting overlap with we'll be announcing in a couple of weeks, including a new project with somebody that I'm going to be teaming up with. I think a lot of folks are going to be very happy to see us finally doing something together. When you are a patron, you get the kind of content and education and theory and broad base of conversation. And I to be honest with you, I'm actually terrified at how important I think it is. I've always thought this show is good, and I'm proud of what we do, and I think we get better and better. because of just the sheer amount of work and curiosity and power of the community and amazing network of people we've built. But the more I watch this play out, I think that sort of actual strategic, Machiavellian, willing to criticize and actually reassess the problems inside the left, but all at the same time anchoring it in an actual global politics and an actual broader set of solidarity and thinking, we are playing an extraordinarily important part of the ecosystem. And it all is because of you. We have a few other things here and there. It's great. Sell merchandise, that does well. People are buying the stuff. It's awesome. It looks great. It's fun. The live shows are something. You know, if you're on YouTube, hit us with a super chat, subscribe. It's a little bit. But the foundation is you as members, you as patrons. Go do it. Patreon.com/TMBS. All right, let's talk about some live shows coming up. That should TMBS.FM. Just put that up. Go to menu. Live shows. To the very bottom. All right, folks. In Austin, North Door, April 3rd. Very few of these left. It's a good name
for what is that? What kind of establishment is the North Door, Driscoll?
Oh, it's just like a nice venue, like rock indie.
Oh, cool.
Very few tickets left. Abby Martin, Anna Kasparian. That's going to be a fucking amazing show. Come see us there. We might even have a surprise guest. Very few left. Grab your tickets now. You can get them at the link in all the show descriptions and what we're tweeting out, but also you can find everything at tmbs.fm/shows, and that's also where you can find our merchandise and information on my book, which is coming out in April. I tweeted out the cover the other day. In June 12th, we're going to be in Boston at the Once Ballroom in Somerville. And I'm actually thinking, honestly, I think I really want to do a show that's just us. I love the guests. Everybody we have as guests are amazing. But I think we're going to hit Boston, and I think it's just going to be us. Those tickets have been moving too. It's much further along. I'm farther out, but people are buying them. And the other nice thing about this show is, you know, I feel bummed because like mostly these shows are 21 and above. This one's 18 and above. So grab your opportunity, and even if you're below 18, you can come with a legal guardian or parent. Very cool. All right, folks. So you go do what you need to do, and if you have had any problem with Patreon or whatever, set up your card, check your cards and do all that. If you can Patreon at higher levels, there's added things for you. But first and foremost, what you're really doing is investing in the show and the enormous amount of output that we have to begin with. All right. Thank you so much. We'll be right back with Ahmed Kaballo. Welcome back to the Michael Brooks Show. It's an honor and pleasure to bring on a returning champion. We did an illicit history of Sudanese left politics for patrons. Now he's on the main show, Ahmed Kaballo. He's a journalist, broadcaster, and producer based in the UK. Ahmed, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Is the sound all good, guys? Okay, fantastic. So, Ahmed, we're talking obviously a lot about the election, many dynamics happening in the world today. Can you give us an update on basically, it's failed several times. The United States has been trying to wage a coup on Venezuela since at least 2002 under Chavez. And up through this day, relentless economic warfare, recognizing a random politician as president. Can you give us a update, I guess, not only on what's happening now, but really like the full spectrum from military to CIA, covert, use of Colombia, economics, everything we need to know to understand this broader war on Venezuela and really, frankly, potentially beyond that to what remains of left governments across Latin America?
Okay, so I was in Venezuela for 6 weeks at a very crucial time. And while I was there, I counted at least 3 attempts to overthrow the democratically elected government of Nicolas Maduro. So I got there shortly after Juan Guaido declared himself the president. So he declared himself the president January the 23rd. I arrived the beginning of February. While I was there, there was this big hoo-ha made about the humanitarian aid trucks and the fact that the government of Venezuela had to let these humanitarian aid trucks in. Now, what was omitted from all of the mainstream media coverage was that aid was already coming in from Cuba, from China, from Turkey, from Qatar. So some progressive states, some less progressive states. And the idea that you would let the US deliver humanitarian aid with countries that are part of this hostile attempt to recognize Juan Guaido, the Lima group, was just preposterous. You wouldn't let an arsonist help you put out the fire. And that's precisely what was proposed. So I went to the bridges connecting Colombia and Venezuela. I saw firsthand what was happening. I saw masked men with Molotov cocktails, throwing the Molotov cocktails at the Venezuelan army who were trying to protect the border from foreign entities. And I saw the mainstream media coverage basically describe these guys as kumbaya, my lord, humanitarian aid, charity workers. And I just couldn't believe what I was seeing. In fact, I had a translator that was meant to meet me on Santander Bridge, and he was a Chavista, and he went up on the local bus because he wanted to go a few days before and give his support like many Chavistas did. And he had to leave the bridge because the bus that he went in on was burnt by these so-called humanitarian volunteers. And I went home and I posted the clip on my social media. I'll see if I can repost it. I went home and I saw MSNBC justifying that very bus being burnt down. They said they burnt the bus down to show their dissatisfaction with the fact that humanitarian aid truck wasn't allowed in. Now, that acceptance, normalization of political violence is obviously very selectively applied. Like, the Gazans have no right to ever throw a stone, yet these guys have every single right to burn down a bus of civilians. And it was just, obviously I'm based here in the UK, and because of something that your viewers might not know is the UK is the most heavily surveillance place in the planet. Yep. So the spectrum of bias in media, it is there, but it's a little more subtle. You never see anything that drastic. So you might see the BBC referring to a left-wing march as being a couple of hundreds when there's tens of thousands, but you never see such overt war propaganda. And actually when I was in Venezuela, I interviewed Jorge Ariesta, the Venezuelan foreign minister, spoke to many ministers. I feel like I produced 2 documentaries, but the clip that went viral the most was me in a supermarket, just a normal supermarket, and just saying, well, there's loads of food here. This supermarket is bigger than the local supermarket back home. And that was seen as a revolutionary act. And when people congratulate me on my work in Venezuela, I say, listen, my niece is 11 years old. She could have gone to Venezuela and filmed that shot. But because of the kind of conformity and the single narrative that gets pushed down, that the simple things that I was doing, which was most of the time just my mobile phone, was going viral because of so much disinformation. And then there was electrical blackout, and then there was a coup attempt in April. So there's been several coup attempts. And now Jay Bolsonaro, I think, is in Florida, and it seems to be the next stage of aggression. So they try to do this soft power approach and use their European allies and their proxy states in the region to recognize Juan Guaido, hoping it would have a domino effect. But that soon failed. Then Juan Guaido went on his tour in Europe recently. I confronted him. And I asked him why he supports sanctions. I think a few other journalists and activists did the same. So that didn't go that well. And now they've kind of given up on Juan Guaido. They've kind of realized that that's a dog that's not going to win this race. And they seem to be moving towards another stage. And Brazil was initially resistant to military intervention. So they were happy to do the humanitarian aid trucks. But it seems that Jay Bolsonaro is out of the Latin American countries, is the one that's more keen on some sort of military intervention. Colombia is less keen not because they have any moral objection to military intervention, but just because they share a border, as does Brazil, and they're worried about the influx of refugees and migrants that would inevitably happen if there was a full-scale military intervention.
Yeah, so actually, let's juxtapose that, Brazil and Colombia. So, yeah, that was my understanding from about a year ago or several months ago when this was really intensifying. The people in Brazil were telling me, one, just Brazilian military is not that it would face heavy consequences for going up against the Venezuelan one, and that secondly, that some of the dynamics that you do see around Trump, where you have this kind of, except Bolsonaro is even more, Trump is this like disgusting thug, but he's also he's such an opportunist in some ways. He's a little bit quicker on his feet. Bolsonaro's got some true believerism in him. And it seemed like, the restraint on Brazil was the faction of this Bolsonaro regime, which was the sort of actual soft coup faction. We go back, not to get too off track, but like the tweet against to the Supreme Court from a major general before one of the key Lula decisions, essentially saying like, yeah, you guys better go the right way. And there's always been this military dimension, obviously with U.S. support, of what's happened in Brazil, but that there was a check in the beginning on Bolsonaro because of cooler heads in the military recognizing that this would just be foolish for them to engage in. I guess I'm getting the sense that dynamic is changing in Brazil. And with Colombia, maybe you could just take this in two parts. Why is Colombia such a major conduit for U.S. policy generally in Latin America?
Well, its free market reign is dependent on Colombia. So it's had so much efforts in destabilizing in Colombia because it has so much private interest. It doesn't have the same resource interest as it does in Venezuela, but it has more kind of financial and neoliberal interest. And that's why there's been so much war and strife in Colombia. Colombia basically gets away with good media because of what's going on in Venezuela. But one thing that's not understood is there's 5.8 million Colombians living within Venezuela. So we're always talking about the refugees leaving Venezuela to Colombia, but there's never an honest discussion about the 5.8 million living within Venezuela and why they live there and what life is like for the trade union leaders, for the Black Colombians, for the left in general. I actually spoke to, he was the vice president candidate for the Green Party under Joe Stein. I'm forgetting his name.
Barack?
Yes, I actually spoke to him.
Barack, I don't remember.
Yeah, I spoke to him when I was in
you know his name?
Venezuela, and we was talking about FARC, and he'd just come back from Colombia. And I remember him looking left and right, and he says, if you just say those words, no, sorry, let me go back. I was talking to him about Simón Bolivar, and he goes, he looked left and right, and I go, you okay? And he goes, in Colombia, simply uttering the word Simón Bolivar could get you beaten up. Such is the fear, such is the fear. And he's the liberator of Colombia. He's the liberator of that country as he is in Venezuela. But it's such the fear of being on the left, such is the intimidation and the atmosphere in Colombia, that many leftists left to go to Venezuela and organize and try to mobilize from there.
Tell us about this Assange trial. And I want to just say, again, really openly that I've definitely criticized some of the roles, very specifically that Assange played in 2016. I don't, at the same time, I don't really, I'm just trying to be clear that I've had criticisms, but that's really separate from an understanding of very specifically what these charges are. And also the conditions he's being held in. So in other words, Ecuador is selling them out as a, trophy for the United States for other favors with this horrible regime in Ecuador is one thing. And then the specific charges against him and their threat to journalism is another, and his conditions are a third. So can you take those, and particularly what is he actually charged with, and explain how that threatens, theoretically it could even threaten what you and I are doing right now.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. I'll start with the last one. So there's this perception in the UK, we have Netflix, we watch these kind of horrible documentaries about the US judiciary system, and we kind of make ourselves feel better by saying, well, it's a lot better here in the UK. We have a much fairer system. We have the right to a fair trial, due process. And what we're seeing with Julian Assange is here in the UK, it's not much better than it is in the US. So, for example, Julian Assange is held in our version of Guantanamo Bay, Belmarsh maximum security prison, with people that are there for terrorism charges, not serial rape charges. Serial killers are held in there. And then the fact that his opportunity to a right to a fair trial is being violated every single day. So the first day of the previous trial, which was, I think, just finished on March the 4th, the Monday, his legal team gave him papers, which were then confiscated by the guards the night before the trial. So he wasn't allowed to look over his papers to best prepare himself for his own trial. When he was managed to inform his defense team, the defense team protested to the judge. The judge said, well, I've got no jurisdiction over what the security wardens do. And you think to yourself, well, if you're the judge of a case, if it's not to do with you, then who's it got to do with?
Right.
Then there's the whole idea that he's in Belmarsh maximum security prison for the minor charge of skipping bail. Skipping bail based on allegations which have now been dropped by Swedish prosecutors. These allegations were related to sexual offences, which were never pressed by the women themselves, which were pressed by Swedish prosecutors and police. At the time, those of us on the left said that if he goes to people, because with this identity politics infatuation that we're seeing at the moment, people were saying, well, what's the big deal? He should go and face justice in Sweden, et cetera, et cetera. And we said, no, he will go to Sweden. He's happy to go to Sweden, but he's very concerned that he'll be extradited to the United States. And we were kind of dismissed as conspiracy theorists and paranoias and dismissing the seriousness of rape. And then what's happened now is that it's proven to be all about extradition to the United States.
Right, and this really, just to be really clear, this doesn't even, I mean, you don't have to even go into the path of disputing the allegations or this or that. I mean, that's important. Talk about it, deal with it. But the fundamental context was, he said, if I go there, he's going to get sent to the U.S. And this whole process is played out in that way extremely clearly. And very importantly, with a charge, which has always been the game to get him here, that literally is about, he is charged with helping Chelsea Manning basically be a journalistic conduit for leaking and disclosing U.S. civilian casualties across the globe. And the closest, let's be really, really specific here, because all the other, the stuff about him is not specific, right? And that can just be used in any way that's convenient to target him and bring a case. But very specifically in the actual charge set is that he helped try to crack a passcode with Manning. And by the way, it didn't even work.
Yeah.
Most of this charge set and the other things, and that's, and by the way, I'm giving you the most one that if that's the strongest one they have is bullshit.
Yeah.
The other stuff is literally, if you go to our friend Ken Klippenstein, the top of his page, he's an investigative journalist. It gives you his signal number. And it says if you have something, I think specifically he does a lot of stuff around ICE, but any number of government malfeasance or corporate malfeasance, if you have information, hit me on Signal. That's part of the charge set against Assange.
Wow.
And the only that is concealed. So, and I'll go back in and read it again, but we covered it in the beginning much more explicitly. So all of it is riding from a PR standpoint on what you think of him personally. And I'm trying to tell you that doesn't matter. WikiLeaks released a lot of incredibly important information, which we all rely on. And you can not like him for multiple reasons, or you can like him and think he's amazing and courageous for multiple reasons. Really has nothing to do with the case, including, by the way, even the stuff from 2016 that people are obsessed with one way or another. These are all charges related to 2011 disclosures of, as an example, U.S. civilian bombings in Afghanistan.
That's right. And then the first part of the case here in the UK is trying to determine whether it is exempt under the 2003 treaty between the United States and the UK, which is an extradition treaty, which clearly states extraditions cannot happen for political cases. Now, they're trying to argue, firstly, they try to argue that what Assange did was not political, which is just absurd.
Absurd.
And then they went to a second level of absurdity and tried to say that even if it is political, it doesn't apply to UK domestic law. So how does that work? How can you have an extradition treaty between two parties, but if the country, if one of the countries can say, well, it doesn't actually apply to our domestic law, it's a mockery of justice. Then there's I want to focus on the abuse of process, because, like I said, here in the UK, there is this perception that we've got the greatest legal system, and yes, things happen in places like the United States and they have death row, but here we have the right to a fair trial. He's kept behind thick, bulletproof glass. He can't even hear what's being said, can't even follow his own trial. He can't sit next to his defense team and instruct them. When the judge then does this tokenistic gesture where every couple of hours she asks him, so are you okay, Mr. Assange? You don't look too well. Are you okay? Are you following the case? He then tells her and says, no, I'm not okay. I'm as much a participant in this trial as an attendee in Wimbledon. Don't know what's going on. I can't participate. She ignores that and continues the trial. So it's just, and then the only thing that he's done wrong in the UK is skip bail. And now, in our justice system, if you used to skip bail, you'd be given a tag. You'd have to wear an electronic tag on your foot, maximum. It's very rare that you would be sentenced to prison, let alone Belmarsh maximum security prison. And even within Belmarsh maximum security prison, there's terror suspects that are allowed to sit next to the defense team while a trial like this is going along. Julian Assange, who's not committed any violent crime, who has exposed what many people believe to be war crimes, is facing this type of system where he faces 175 years, where the UN Special Rapporteur for Torture has argued that what he's been going through can only be described as torture. Then there's 100 doctors in the UK that are worried about his health and think that he won't make it to the end of the trial. It's a mockery of justice. Then there's the first judge who silently went away from the case because there was an article by Mark Curtis, I think in Declassified, where he was managed to show that she had many links to organizations that had been exposed by WikiLeaks.
Right.
So the whole thing is just...
And so just to recap, so we have, okay, he exposed global war crimes. He also exposed even more specific things like Haiti wants to raise its minimum wages. The Clinton State Department kills it. And also other stuff that's frankly more trivial, to be honest. I mean, like the Scientology, which is terrible. Good, expose them. But I'm just saying a lot of just basically adversarial journalism.
Yeah.
And then he... then he goes to the Ecuadorian embassy. He gets faced charges in Sweden. He says this is because they're trying to get me to the United States. That's dismissed. But then, of course, in fact, those charges, and I'm talking just purely in a legal process, they've been completely dropped. Yeah. As soon as he gets out of the embassy in Ecuador, the deal, and we don't know what it is, but Lenin Moreno government in Ecuador, as soon as they acquired power, did a hard turn right and has partnered aggressively with the United States. And there's a lot of questions that we don't know the answer to, but there's a lot of questions surrounding the deal making with Lenin Moreno. At the same time, in Ecuador, we have a similar process as you saw in Brazil, where they're trying to basically put a politically hyped case against the former leader, Rafael Correa. He can't come into the country. And they just had anti-austerity protests, which were pretty violently put down by the security forces. And now Julian Assange is facing charges that relate to the original leaks, not the 2016 stuff, and essentially for functions that would describe doing investigative journalism and protecting sources. And while this is happening, he's being held in conditions in the UK, which, as you say, the UN Special Rapporteur calls torture. That's the situation we're in. That's
right. And to add to that, he's held in solitary confinement for 23 hours out of 24. These are the very worst criminals in the UK, and they petitioned the prison wardens and guards to allow him out of solitary confinement. So he was initially held in solitary confinement for the whole day. Then they said, this is unfair. Allow this guy out. Allow him to walk. So we're seeing a state where the worst criminals in Belmarsh Maximum Security Prison are showing more compassion to a guy who's been published in the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Guardian, who have now all done everything they can to disassociate themselves from Julian Assange. And you got to ask, so another part of the case is they claim that some of the things that he published has put US lives at risk. Mm-hmm. Now, they haven't provided any evidence of a single fingernail being hurt. They're relying on anonymous sources that have not been presented. They've not shown any evidence. And they're saying that in the trial resumes, I think, May the 18th. And apparently some evidence will be presented there. But the first part of the trial, there's been zero evidence to demonstrate any US lives have been put in danger. And there was, he tried to contact the Secretary of State, I think it was, Hillary Clinton, at one point because some of his documents were taken from his computer and published online. And when he tried to contact the Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, they basically were just ignored. Right. So this was used by his defense lawyers to say the only time potentially lives were put in danger, and it wasn't by us, when we tried to contact the US, they did nothing about it. Right. So the evidence against him is paper thin. If there was true justice, true due process, a right to a fair trial, then it wouldn't go anywhere. But some are worrying that this is a foregone conclusion, and it's basically a show trial, and then he'll be extradited to the United States where he'll face another show trial. Right. So it's very worrying signs. Who's going to be the next Julian Assange? If I was to ask you, you're a journalist, I'm a journalist. If you was to get something like the collateral damage video, yep. If you was to get that in 2021, knowing what publishing the video like that could do, if you was to get the Iraq and Afghanistan war logs, if you was to get any of the material that is clearly within the public interest, if you was to get that material, how you'd have to ask yourself and your family some hard questions. I'm going to publish this. This could mean 175 years in prison. It could mean my life is over. You'll be facing a long legal battle just to have visitation rights. Yep. Is that something that you could do?
Well, I think we all know the answer. I mean, I think we all know the answer to that. And we know, which is that if we said, oh, yes, we would power through and do it anyways, we're lying. I mean, we might, but to just say like, oh, yeah, we did. Lie. Yeah. That's a lie.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I think you hit the nail on the head. It's not about Julian Assange per se, not about his personal conduct. It's about what this means to journalism going forward. We're seeing I work for Press TV UK. Our YouTube channel has been shut down. You mentioned Rafael Carrera. He's been taken down from Facebook. Yep. Their Instagram posts that were commemorating Qasem Soleimani, the general, the Iranian general assassinated by Donald Trump, they were censored. We seem to be in a weird time where journalism, the right to a free press, the right to an alternative point of view is being censored. My friends Ben Norton and Max Blumenthal did some fantastic work during the Iranian crisis where it looked like war with Iran was looming. And people were saying to him on Grey Zone, thank you very much. I'm contributing this via Patreon for your great work in Iran. And that was sent back. That money was sent back. So it seems to be a real war on journalism. And I think that's how this needs to be kind of contextualized. This isn't just about Julian Assange. This is about how can the guy that published a journalist, a Reuters journalist, being assassinated in cold blood by drone strikes, how can that guy be getting 175 years, yet the people that committed these heinous acts have not been brought to justice?
Ahmed Kaballo, appreciate your time as always. Talk to you soon, and thank you for your work, man.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate
good
it.
To you. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, folks, Ahmed Kaballo, check him out. We'll have links. All right, so what we're going to do, we're running a few minutes behind here. we have Isiah James in the building. And first, we're going to do a gem with David Griscom. Then Isiah is going to come and take us through. Might even do the how to beat Biden segment. But first, so we're going to talk with him for about a half hour or so about his race. But first, we have a gem. All right, just the intro for him. Don't make him talk over the beat.
No, I get a lot of emails about that, honestly.
How much they like it?
Oh, yeah.
And they want you to do it?
They love having to adjust
Go ahead,
their
David.
sound levels every YouTube video. All right.
We are not doing the salt march because I just need to check in with my own lived experience over
God.
the weekend. Gandhi
Yeah.
Elizabeth Warren.
Well,
Yeah.
we know this story, and I just wanted to hit it again because I think we have a pretty exceptional villain in the case of Joe Biden that we're facing right now when it comes to trade. And going into Michigan specifically is a state that's been hit so hard with the United States free trade agreements. And I just was coming across some numbers that were pretty wild. Just in Michigan alone, since they went into NAFTA, Michigan alone lost 168,000 manufacturing jobs, or 21.3% of the entire industry in the state of Michigan. And if you've been to Michigan or you know people from there, it's been absolutely devastating over the past few years while people try to relocate, find new work. I mean, it's been devastating for a state that for a very long time was one of the most prosperous states in the United States. And it's not just Michigan, obviously. Our trade deficits with Mexico and China have created a lot of issues for the United States, and they very specifically come out of these free trade agreements. So in the same way, overall, in Michigan, 43,000 jobs have been lost or displaced just because of the United States trade deficit with Mexico, and 80,000 jobs have been lost or displaced because of our relationships with China. And the point here is not to demonize, for example, international or global trade. It's to recognize that these systems are systems of global power, right? That capitalists for a long time have always found ways to coordinate internationally. But what these free trade agreements really represented was the complete dominance over our political system by our corporate interests. So in NAFTA, there was this promise that this shifting of our legal relationships with Mexico was going to create a significant amount of jobs in the United States, has been proven absolutely false. The United States trade deficit nationally, so this is national, has displaced 682,000 jobs since NAFTA began. I mean, that's a incredible amount of people, and we really need to start thinking about these as not just numbers, but as individual lives of people who had stability, had a source of income, who lost that. And just think about yourself, how difficult it is to be able to uproot yourself from a community and to move across the country into the hot sectors or whatever. It's not something that is feasible for a lot of people. And on top of it, the kind of atomization that we've seen in the United States over the past couple decades is proof of the fact that that's not a good system in the first place. Is having to make people move across the country, leaving their families, their roots, and their cultural ties, creates a lot of people who are very alienated from society, and understandably so. Now, I bring this up because Joe Biden, Sleepy Joe, our favorite boy, is somebody who not only was a big proponent of NAFTA then, he still defends it. He says that it was the right thing to do at the time. Just like he believes it was the right thing to do at the time to work with segregationists. Right. I mean, Joe Biden's whole legacy is saying is he thought a lot of things were right to do at the time that were not in the long term. So, here we are in this moment, and we're seeing we have this new trade deal that Joe Biden pushes and supports. Kind of like mealy mouth, like, oh, I wish if I was negotiating it directly, it'd be a little bit better. But it's the same crap. It's exactly the same kind of idea as NAFTA. And Bernie Sanders is the only candidate continuously who's standing up and telling the truth about what these things are. Now, remember, the free trade consensus that took over the globe came out of a time where in the United States, there was an increase in wages for workers, there was an increase in unionization, and there was an increase in labor militancy. And the entire neoliberal project, from these free trade agreements to Reagan, to Thatcher, to Bill Clinton, was a response to that movement. So that goes to the Federal Reserve when we were talked about the war that Paul Volcker waged on the working class that started in the 70s. At the same time, we were pushing these kind of free trade agreements as a solution. Capital was already recognizing that in the United States, that the rate of profit was falling, and that the only way that they could continue to make money was to punish labor. So you did that by making it more difficult to organize and by making people precarious, by pulling jobs and moving them overseas. Capital is already international. It's an international system. They have relationships and they operate on a different level than governments. And the difficult thing that we've been seeing over the past few decades is that while capital has become more and more international and governments have become more and more obedient to capital over labor, that what's the pushback is, unions that oftentimes work only in sectors, work only regionally, and don't really have the kind of international coordination that is necessary to push back against these horrible international trade arrangements. So one, we need to oppose these kind of trade deals that are designed basically to allow capitalists and these major corporations to skirt rules to be able to move labor, to move their facilities wherever they want to undermine labor. But two, until we are able to build a kind of international labor movement that's able to stand up in Mexico, in Detroit, in China, we're always going to have this issue. Or we need to have government organizations in the United States that are able to stand up for workers, doing things like implementing capital controls. Until we can find a way to deal with the fact that capital is international and for the most part the working class movement is atomized and individualized, we're going to continue to see this kind of devastation. But I'll tell you one thing, there's only one candidate in this race right now who is going to take the first steps into trying to stop this horrible flow that has devastated the United States and is devastating the world, and that's Bernie Sanders.
100%. 110%. So I guess we'll do the how-to guide to beat Sleepy Joe. Actually, you know what? I should do that really quick now. After all, it is the title. let me just do a little responsibility here.
Wait, you're getting nervous, man.
Actually, let's go to Elizabeth Warren for a response to your segment. Well, I agree that NAFTA wasn't great, but at the same time, there was a whole binder that I actually paid somebody to do of tweets about me.
Did a hell of a job in your job.
I have a lot of stuff to think about. Yeah, actually, that probably was the most effective person on Warren's campaign. The tweet chronicler. The only person that earned their money.
I printed out every tweet that had a snake emoji in it, added at Warren.
Yeah. I don't have time to talk about the new NAFTA. I'm chronicling snake emojis.
Well, welcome to the staff. You can work for us now.
Thank you so much. Again.
I want you to collate every single tweet that has the word cognitive in it.
Nelson Mandela in the pivotal year of resistance. I thought people were very rude to me. This is, by the way, this is the cycle of, you remember in 2000 and in the Brazilian elections, Ciro Gomes, who actually, I mean, at least he's been a much more effective politician his whole career than Warren, but same dynamic. He represented more sort of like upper middle class bougie liberals and had a slightly center left message, and he didn't make it to the runoff, and he flew to Paris because he was pissed. So I'm sensing a theme of the narcissistic self-indulgence.
We hold these truths to be self-evident. All men and women created by you know the thing.
Exactly, I know the thing. And the thing with Bernie is he might not do that. And he might have fought for every single important issue over the last 40 years. But there's a guy named Will Menaker who's very mean. So, all right. Very noble stuff. Here's how you beat Joe Biden. Bernie Sanders needs to synthesize a message that involves his actual crusade and his actual purpose, which is deep reform and dealing with the actual crises that beset this country. And he's always been the only candidate who's been serious and credible on that. But he also needs to recognize with the fact that the strategy of just mobilizing youth is naive. It wasn't working. It's not happening. Doesn't mean you don't have the same policies. It doesn't mean you don't have the same rallies, but you need to pivot hard to older folks and folks in the suburbs who are scared and want nothing but to be Trump or some type of normalcy. He needs to say, Joe Biden cannot beat Trump for a variety of reasons. I actually am normal, as evidenced by the fact that I'm a popular politician. I still have The guy still has high personal approval ratings after having an unremittent war waged against him by the entirety of the mainstream and corporate press and Democratic establishment and other candidates for years, because he has an obvious decency about him and a commitment to policy sets that are good for most people. And then he does need to go into the industrial Midwest and say Joe Biden not only voted for all these trade agreements, he fought for every single one at the same time that he was pushing for cuts to Medicare and Social Security. And oh, believe me, he might work with Republicans to cut your retirement. He voted for every single trade agreement that has hollowed out the industrial Midwest. You don't have a job? Thank Joe Biden. You have a medical emergency and you're drowning in debt? Thank the senator from MBNA. And by the way, you can also look at how we might be able to answer all the questions about this horrible record by watching videos like this. Let's do a montage, because I'm sorry. Trying to force down a candidate to face Donald Trump, who is in transparent and radical physical and mental decline, is unacceptable.
Time friend, and she's a friend. She's been my friend in and out of public life.
We hold these truths to be self-evident. All men and women created by you know the thing. Tomorrow's Superstar Tuesday.
All right, Chuck. Thank you very much.
All right. It's Chris, but anyway.
Chris. My name's Joe Biden. I'm a Democratic candidate for the United States Senate. Look me over. If you like what you see, help out. If not, vote for the other Biden. I love this place. Look, what's not to like about Vermont? One of the things I'm proudest of is getting passed, getting moved, getting control of the Paris Climate Accord. I'm the guy that came back after meeting with Deng Xiaoping and making the case that I believe China would join if we put pressure on them. You had people like you had people like the former chairman and leader of the party in Germany.
Go to Joe 30330.
Okay, let's play one more. This is the most recent one. This just happened. Today he gave a rally where he spoke they clocked it at 7 minutes. 7 minutes.
What's Bernie doing now? Just to contrast, he's doing like 3 45-minute rallies a day.
Yeah. And he usually goes a bit over 45.
So folks, you want to nominate a Democrat, a lifelong Democrat, a proud Democrat, an Biden-Obama Democrat.
This is not about laughing at this guy. We don't make any, look, we're not above that. We've made jokes, whatever. But the truth is actually on a human level, it's terrifying and it's sad and it's deeply disturbing. But this is a presidential election against yes. It's going to get forgotten in all of this mix. And the people who have, on cable who have freaked out and hyperventilated the most about how dangerous Donald Trump is are clearly the ones that are most comfortable with him going for another 4 years. But in fact, a barbarous, dangerous, grotesque, fundamentally authoritarian, racist, xenophobic, sexist, and grotesque administration that we need to defeat. And these people are doing every single thing in their power to put forward a man who, besides his record that Trump can run circles around and will run circles around, all to suppress an effort to have a campaign that will actually help working and young people in this country for the first time anything's been done for them systemically in decades, to fight and do everything they can to put forward somebody who clearly cannot do this. And this does need to be a topic of conversation. This does need to be something out there. This does need to be in the news. Because the Democratic Party and a major presidential campaign are, I won't even make I'll half make the weekend at Bernie's joke, but like actually that in a general election in an unprecedented danger of Donald Trump. Of course, we know the Democrats are a major danger as well. But look, trying to do this, share this with folks in your family. Share this with people who don't watch content like this. Because this, if their number one desire is to beat Donald Trump, vote for the candidate who's personally popular and is mentally and physically able to do this. It's a simple point.
If Joe was ready to go, they wouldn't have had all these stalking horse candidates run to take focus off of him for the last 8 months.
Let me tell you this, and I have an enormous amount of affection including personally for people in the Sanders campaign. And I think a lot of what they've done going up against these Death Stars is incredible. The organizing is incredible. The campaign is incredible. The fundraising is incredible. They've made some strategic mistakes, in my view. And if they were going up against a 2016 Joe Biden and they made even one of these mistakes, this thing would already be over. Because as I've been saying also for months, it doesn't matter what we think. Joe Biden, we can dislike Joe Biden for a million different reasons. It doesn't matter. He's a popular and liked figure. And it has to be put across to people that this, as somebody was saying earlier today, this is like Muhammad. If you like Joe Biden, this is like sending Muhammad Ali out to fight after he needs to retire. It's not right to him. And it's dangerous as hell for the country. All right, let's take a little break, and the great Isiah James is going to join us. You want to play this video? Okay, yeah. Let's play this video. This is an ad. Isiah James is running in the 9th District of New York, covering major parts of Brooklyn, including Crown Heights, I believe East Flatbush, Park Slope. Very, very big, very, very important district. A lot of people who need somebody who is all about housing. A lot of people who need somebody who is going to say that, of course, we need to have safe neighborhoods and so on, but we cannot have a paramilitary operation and occupation of our streets. We need our kids to be safe. We need good schools. We need houses and homes and health care. This is an ad for his campaign, and we're going to come right back with him.
But every state, there's always a lobby that has their hands somewhere. In Las Vegas, the casino lobby. In New York, it's the real estate lobbies that run our politicians. My opponent, he takes hundreds of thousands of dollars from the real estate industry in one breath and then has the nerve in the other breath to say that she cares about housing. What we need to do is repeal every single law that has a developer's hands on it and start from scratch. HUD cannot use operating funds to build any new public housing at all. So who gets those contracts? Developers get those contracts. So a developer builds a giant building with 100 units in it and makes 10% of them available. But you know what they do? What they do is they factor in Westchester, Rockland County, Staten Island, Upper East Side, Upper West Side, and now the area median income makes a two-bedroom $2,700, $2,800, $2,900. So the government can't get in the business of building new housing. Developers get those contracts. They have AMI rigged, so none of the units are affordable. And then when people do move in those units, they make repairs and upgrades to them. And 2 years later, the $2,700 apartment is now $3,500 market value apartment. We need to get rid of AMI when it comes to public housing. We need to stop giving developers contracts to build these buildings. Repeal the Faircloth Amendment so the government can get back into the business of building public housing. We need to fund all public housing authorities across this country. NYCHA right now is owed billions of back dollars that they do not get from the federal government because our politicians, D's and R's, use that fund as a slush fund, as a piggy bank. And meanwhile, gentrification and homelessness is some of the highest in the city, right in this district.
Welcome back to the Michael Brooks Show. Honor and pleasure to welcome Isiah James. He's running for Congress in the 9th District of New York City. Isiah, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me, man.
It's my great pleasure. I've been
Absolutely.
watching you out here on the trail a couple of months. There's a lot of people, a lot of great people running for office, and it's tricky because, frankly, we can't get to everybody. We get to some, but it's an important and super noble undertaking. But you've really, I mean, one, we're here in New York, so there's that local part of it, but you're really out there, I think, just communicating on an extremely clear and visceral level. What's your story? Why are you running? What's it about?
Well, first, I think that we need to communicate on a clear and visceral level. You know what I mean? And I don't even think it's visceral. Visceral not in the sense that I'm trying to have an impact when I communicate, but visceral in the sense that people are really living this stuff, and they're like, well, you know what? This guy's talking to the issues that affect me. And clear, we don't need political speak anymore. People are tired of that. People want yes and no answers. You know what I mean? There are 5 letters that make up the 2 words you need to say when a voter asks you a question. And if you, you know what I mean? And if you have this big, long, drawn-out speech about what you're going to do and how you're going to do it, and just saying, will you fight for affordable housing? Yes. That's the first thing that should come out of your mouth. So, but my story is the American story, man. I'm son of immigrants. Well, my father is from Jamaica, came to Brooklyn in 1970. My mother grew up in Pascagoula, Mississippi, a little small sharecropping town on the coast. My grandmother, who just passed away 2 weeks ago.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, no, thank you, man. Yeah. She raised my mother, and they were sharecroppers. And after my mother was in segregated South, separate schools, separate businesses, everything. And after Dr. King was assassinated in 58 or 68, my grandmother was like, all right, I got to get out of the South. And she moved up here to New York. My parents met. My father, believe it or not, who's still not a citizen to this day, he came over on like a guest worker program from Jamaica. There were 25 Jamaicans he came over with. 2 of them came back from Vietnam. 1 of them was my father. So yeah, even to this day, and my dad's a veteran. So I'm one of 11 kids. We didn't have much growing up. We grew up like dirt poor. I remember, you remember when McDonald's used to have the free ketchup, what you could just go and grab? Mm-hmm. So we were so poor at some time, my mom would send all of us in there to grab 2 handfuls of ketchup. And she would make soup out of that. And that would be our dinner, that and bread. And that would be our dinner. We were homeless at one point growing up, and there wasn't a lot of economic opportunity for people who looked like me in my neighborhood. I got buddies.
What was your neighborhood?
I grew up in Flatbush and down in Florida.
Yep.
So I have buddies right now who are in jail 27, 30 years, life. I have a lot of buddies who are dead, not from the military, just from the streets. So I joined the Army at the age of 18, 3 months out of high school, and I joined the Army. And 30 days out of basic training, I was on my way to Iraq.
30 days?
30 days.
Jesus Christ.
I graduated basic training in Fort Benning, Georgia, got to Fort Hood, Texas. 30 days later, I was on a plane headed to Iraq. Didn't even get to see my family before I went because I didn't have enough leave saved up. And my first deployment was 15 months. 15 months. So
what year was that? That
was October 2006 to January 2008 was my first deployment because I was part of the surge. Yep. We got extended. The next deployment was December. We left Christmas 2008 for the second deployment and got back December 2009. And then my third deployment was June 2010 to May of 2011 in Afghanistan. So during my time,
served in both.
Yeah, I served both fields during my time. But that gives me the perspective of how corrupt the military-industrial complex is because I've been inside of that Leviathan. Most people can attack it from the outside, but they don't really understand what goes on inside until you're actually in there, and then you see how corrupt it is, and you're like, wow. So it was very eye-opening for me, you know what I mean? And I got wounded on one of my deployments. I'm 90% disabled. There's no hearing in my left ear. My eardrum got ruptured, blown out. My C5 vertebrae got jacked up. Had traumatic brain injury from IED blasts, PTSD. I still deal with PTSD to this day. I'll be very candid with you. Like a lot of veterans, I was dealing with a lot of demons when I got out of the military, and I almost killed myself. I remember sitting on my bathroom floor with a bottle of scotch and a bottle of sleeping pills, and I was just crying uncontrollably because I just didn't want to live life anymore. I didn't want to be here anymore because of the things I had seen and done, and just so much turmoil in my head. But as cliche as it sounds, something was like, you know what? You got to keep fighting because you have to keep fighting. And the very next day, I went to the VA hospital. You know what I mean? And they kept me in there for a few months while I was recovering and healing. And it was then and there I saw that people actually do give a damn about us.
Yeah.
But they're just so strapped for resources. They can't get to every person who needs help. But the money is there, but the resources are being held from those people. You know what I mean? And that's why I say we lose 22 veterans a day to suicide. If another country was killing our veterans at the rate we allow them to kill themselves, we'd be at war already.
Yeah.
We'd already went to war, but we lose 22 a day. A lot of them you see walking around here on the streets of Brooklyn. You know what I mean? So when the catalyst that helped me get to where I am now was when I met my wife. My wife, who's a public school teacher here in Brooklyn. She's the sweetest, most amazing woman, and I fell in love with her instantly. And church-going woman. I was like, there's no way she's gonna want to be with me, how messed up I am. So instead of just leaving therapy, I pushed through, and I still have my demons. I still go to therapy to this day. but she is like that one ray of hope. I cling to her because her spirit is just such that, I mean, she's a 3K and pre-K teacher. So she deals with little kids all day. So she's so understanding and nurturing and all that stuff. And for most guys in the military, it's hard to admit you need a nurturer. I'm an infantryman, bro. Like, I literally got shot at for a living. I got 39 months of combat. I have been shot, blown up, IED, rocket, you name it. Never ask for help in the military. It's not something we do. But outside, when I saw her genuineness, and you know what I mean, sometimes I just sit there with my wife and I just put my head on her shoulder. I'm like, I just gotta let out a sigh of relief knowing she's there, because she's literally like, you know, go back to Charlie Brown, like the security blanket.
What happens with the political trajectory too? Because you also studied politics, you studied public policy. Your wife is an educator. You talked about that a lot in terms of, so put it all together for what made you decide to run for office.
Okay, so I'll tell you down and dirty. So, like you said, so when I was going back on my second deployment, I had just been there 15 months. I had only been back in the States 11 months, and we get orders to go again. So I'm like, why the hell am I going right back to the place that I just left? I just made it out. Why am I going back? So that's what got me to thinking not about the decisions that were being made, but who was making these decisions. So when I got out of the military, I enrolled in school at Brooklyn College, and I got my undergrad in political science. And that gave me like a little peek into how government operates. So then I went a step further and went to graduate school for public policy, and that's where you understand, because that's where the dollars and cents are chopped up. And that's where you see, well, wow, we do have enough money to do these things, but there's not being allocated to the right places. So doing that, I began working with other veterans who were going through the same thing, having a hard time transitioning. And I started to realize that the problems they were facing weren't just in school. They were in housing, they were in healthcare, they were in government. So that's when the activism got more and more welled up in me, and I started actually meeting with local elected officials. And the woman that I'm running against right now, I actually had a meeting with her in her office around some very critical issues.
Yvette
Clark. Around some very critical issues to the community. And I think she almost felt insulted that somebody would challenge her and push her on these issues. And then she was just intransigent about everything, just like, we'll see. And I was pissed, and I came home and I told my wife, and she's like, well, you got to find something to do about it. And that night, like 2 a.m, bro, I Googled how to run for Congress. And I'm serious, I watched
This is exactly how it should be. You don't need all these fucking people that have been thinking about how to do it since they were 3.
No.
This is I love this
I Googled how to run for Congress, saw some YouTube videos. Watched YouTube videos for about a week, and I was like, all right, I got the gist of how to get this stuff started. So boom, that's how I got it started.
That's amazing. So you have a very clear understanding of how this connects with foreign policy, how this connects with empire, how this connects with the military-industrial complex, and just the incredible amount of money that goes to it and the cost it has across the world, and for our veterans, obviously, and our people in the service. And then very specifically, you pinpoint, I mean, you talk, obviously, you support Medicare for all, single payer, Medicare for all. Yeah, the no bullshit Medicare for all.
Yeah.
You know, you support all the right policy issues that people have been talking about, but particularly in the New York context, but any major city, and increasingly not even just major cities, you really pinpoint it. And I could be wrong, but when I listen to you speak, what really has got you with Congresswoman Clark is someone whose family has been in this neighborhood. She obviously is from this neighborhood, and she has not only not lifted a finger to stop the just absolute collapse of housing for working people in this neighborhood. She's been a facilitator of it.
Absolutely.
And so I want you to bring all those themes together.
So let's talk about it. So her mother ran for city council and won city council. God bless her. Yvette Clark then inherited her mother's city council seat. And then she worked for the congressman who she later ran to replace, and has now been in office for going on 14 years. And like you said, she is responsible for the collapse of housing. She takes thousands and thousands of dollars from real estate developers in our district. The same real estate developers who are pushing poor people to the margins, not even to the margins anymore. They're off the damn map because they can't live in Brooklyn anymore. So we talk about the military-industrial complex. She is proud. She said she's proud to take thousands of dollars from Boeing, Raytheon, BAE Systems, General Dynamics. And in our district, which is 50% African-American, there are 8 recruiting stations in our district. But they're not in Park Slope. They're not in Prospect Park. They're on Utica Ave. They're on Flatbush. They're on Nostrand. 8 in our damn district. So why? There's no defense industry in our district. When you walk into the store and you put $1 on the counter, you expect something in return. Indeed. These people aren't giving her money because she's amenable, because they like the cut of her jib. They're giving her money because they expect something in return. And whatever they expect in return is anathema to people who live in my district, because it's not going to serve them. It's going to hurt them. So just today I saw an interview with her. She sits on the powerful Energy and Commerce Committee, which is responsible for healthcare. She's the vice chair of it. Why hasn't she brought a Medicare for All bill to the House floor? You know why? Because she takes hundreds of thousands of dollars from the pharmaceutical industry. So in one breath, she says, yes, I'm for Medicare for all. But in the other breath, she empowers the same industries that lobby to kill the bills before they even make it to the floor. If your child is born with cancer, God forbid, cancer drugs are $10,000 a month. Are you supposed to hope you get to somebody starts a GoFundMe for you? No, we literally, thousands of people in this country are dying every single year because they don't have access to healthcare. And I think I even said access because they program us to say it. We don't need access anymore. We need universal healthcare. I have access to a Ferrari. I just can't afford the damn thing. Right. And I'll never be able to afford a Ferrari. Right. So a pathway to access to affordability, all these are code words that industry speak for. Nothing's going to change. Things are going to stay the same. And for us to live in a district that is 50% African American and to have had a black congresswoman for 14 years, and by every measurable metric, black folks in our community are doing so much worse, is a damn shame. It is a shame. Martin Luther King Jr. said, don't tell me what you believe. Show me what you do, and I'll tell you what you believe. She has already shown us what she believes.
Absolutely. And so, actually, I have 2 other bigger questions on that. But one, can you also talk specifically about the idea that as a congressperson representing that district, which has so many people from the Caribbean, we cover the Caribbean a fair amount on this show politically, just as if you represented a district that had a lot of people from Ukraine or a lot of people from Senegal or a lot of people from anywhere on earth. There is a very special relationship between the district that she represents and the Caribbean. And also, I would say specifically a special relationship between the Caribbean and Brooklyn. It's a very important part of what makes Brooklyn, Brooklyn, and our whole hemisphere. We know that Haiti, as an example, I mean, I guess I can't say literally because Puerto Rico is still literally colonized, but Haiti is a colony in all but name. Yeah. We know that we fueled all sorts of tremendous violence in Jamaica's example. I mean, the wild violence that people saw here in the 80s in New York that had something to do with Jamaican gangs had something to do with what we did in Jamaica, right? So what part of that dimension, as a congressperson who has a platform to say we need to cancel the Haitian debt, we need to stop putting IMF programs on Jamaica and Guyana, we need to, support progressive forces in Trinidad, whatever. I mean, just that dimension is important. Yeah. So talk, what would you do on that? And is she a great advocate of Caribbean solidarity and justice?
I would say no. And like I said, yes, there's a very, very huge Caribbean population in our district. Like I said, my father came to our district in 1970 from Jamaica. And yes, what you're talking about, Haiti is right off our southern shore, the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. We could easily mobilize forces around the world to help Haiti, to provide relief for Haiti. Yes, we need to cancel the Haitian debt. We need to cancel Puerto Rico's debt. These are literally, Puerto Rico lives in this quasi-colony, protectorate, whatever the hell. The people in Puerto Rico need self-determination. Either they're going to become the 51st state or they're going to have full autonomy on their own. We're going to cancel their debt and we're going to help them to move forward with the rest of the world. In the family of nations. We can do the same thing for Puerto Rico. And the IMF does nothing to help poor countries. The IMF extracts resources from poor countries. They set it up as what the IMF try to do, in my opinion, is that they want to turn Haiti into another fantasy playground and push all the Haitians out of Haiti, so they flee to the surrounding islands, and then Haiti is now some fantasy playground where huge resorts are going up and folks are coming down there investing billions.
This is the other story of Haiti, by the way. I just want to let people know. That is because everybody sees, yes, there's huge poverty, there's amazing social movements, but people here, to the extent they hear anything, they hear about the tension around Port-au-Prince and all of that. But there is an emergent tourism market. They call it, they still use language like this, a frontier market. But they've got the same game plan there,
of course,
as anywhere else, because that's how capitalism works.
Listen, capitalism in and of itself is racist. All right, let me just tell folks out there, if you didn't know that, capitalism is racist.
They do. They're a pretty good audience.
Me as a black man in the United States of America, like literally, we were the first capital. You know what I mean? We were bought and traded as pieces to add to farm equipment, basically. You know what I mean? So, and capitalism in and of itself cannot sustain itself. It will eat itself, because whenever you have a system that extracts so much from so many and concentrates it in the hands of so few, it will collapse. We saw that in the 1800s in the French Revolution, when the aristocracy was just taking everything and the people didn't have anything. They revolted. Now, I'm not calling for armed revolution, but we better wake up and understand that America in and of itself was founded on slavery, but our document is a democratic socialist document. Can you imagine if the 13 colonies had faced the British by themselves or piecemeal? They had to pool all their resources, manpower, collective knowledge, tools, everything in order to stand up to the monarch, to the empire. And we won. And they did that because they came together. We have to do the same thing in this country, but we have to center all of our policies around poor people and working people and people of color and marginalized communities. Every policy we have, because the rich people don't need any more money.
That's right.
Jeff Bezos right now is worth $100 billion net worth. If you tax Jeff Bezos at 99% of his net worth, he'd still be one of the richest people in the world, because he'd be a billionaire. That's right. At 99, you tax me at 99%, I'm broke. Jeff Bezos is 100% fine. He'll still be one of the richest men walking the face of the earth. Why this man needs to go after more and more money, I do not know. Why we have politicians who keep giving corporate tax breaks, and we have to, if we're going to be critical of the R's, we have to be critical of the D's, because they vote for the same fossil fuel subsidies. They vote for the same bank bailouts. They vote for the same corporate crony capitalism that the R's vote for. Just the D's do it, but they smile in your face. The R's, you can tell, the Republicans, they're all about money. So they're easy to figure out. You know, Caesar said it's not the enemy at the gates that's the danger, because they come bearing a flag. Right. It's the enemy from within that you have to watch, because they smile in your face and they don't make themselves known.
That's right.
So that's one thing we have to.
Yeah, Bill Clinton shows up and goes, I love Toni Morrison. All right, we're going to clean your neighborhood out now.
How did you do Bill Clinton impersonation?
I so love to hear your perspective, Isaiah. Oh, your family's going to actually lose their house.
That's mad
Sorry.
creepy, bro. That's mad creepy. What the hell?
How do you take on the military-industrial complex in Congress?
First of all, right now, it needs to be cut in half. Not even that. I say we need to go back to pre-9/11 military funding. You know what I mean? So that is nowhere near where we're at now. How we cut it is we talk about it. And you have somebody like me talking about it, not extemporaneously. Because AOC, she tries to talk about it, but they can easily shout her down. What does she know? She's a bartender from the Bronx. She doesn't know. I'm a highly decorated disabled veteran. I've been there, done that, got the T-shirt to prove it. So I can call them on their BS when they need to be called on their BS, number one. Number two, how we attack it is we show people how much money we're spending versus what we're not spending on education or healthcare. 55% of discretionary spending in this country is on the military budget. We're approaching $1 trillion. Meanwhile, our Department of Education budget is $67 billion. Military budget, with all the things factored in, is $790 billion. Yvette Clarke voted for that, to fund that. So we're spending 13, 14 times more on bombs and bullets than we are on books and backpacks. We take it on by introducing bills to cut the damn spending of the military-industrial complex. We have bases all over the world. We are literally an empire. Every empire before us has fallen. We have history. The Ottomans, the Turks, the Assyrians, the Romans, the Greeks, they've all fallen because they stretched themselves too thin and they did not take care of the home state when they needed to take care of it. And we are falling in that same trap. History is our guide, and we're going to be doomed if we do not right this ship. And believe it or not, America is a big ship. And just like the Titanic, when we see the iceberg is climate change. It's income inequality. It's racism. We see it dead ahead of us. So we have to start turning now. If not, it'll be too late to turn. 10 years from now, when the climate is wrecked, we can't turn it back. We have to start turning now. So
final couple of, well, actually not the final thing, because we're going to talk about how people can get involved in your campaign. Yeah. But I want to, one thing that I am curious about, because I think, again, we're still in the fight and Bernie Sanders has done a lot of things right. But one thing that has not happened is definitely like his campaign has not turned out a bunch of new people. That was part of the strategy. It's not happening. Part of my theory as to why that isn't happening, frankly, is because I had an interesting conversation the other day, and maybe I'm taking too much out of this, but it really hit me. I went and was invited to speak at a college in Pennsylvania. The speech was over. It was fun. By the way, thank you. Great time to if any of the students or professors watching. They got me a cab to go back to New York. And I got in the cab, and it was nice. It was very nice. It's like almost like a 2-hour drive. So it was a woman driver. She had her boyfriend with her, and I chatted with them. They're a nice couple, and they wanted to know, what I did, and I was too tired to kind of make. Sometimes I make up fake things so I don't have to talk about this stuff. But I just say, I was just giving a talk, whatever, and so. And they were like, oh, and I remember the woman, she was like, I don't really like politics because you just don't know who's right. And I said, I was like, oh, well, I'll give you the information on my show. I got you. You can find out who's right pretty easily. You just got to watch me. And then we were oh, absolutely. But it was I was joking. And I wasn't sure. I mean, honestly, probably. To be really blunt, if her boyfriend wasn't a black man, I might have thought she was a Trump voter by kind of chatting with her. That kind of, to be honest, would give me some pause, like maybe not. And she's like, well, I'll tell you this. I don't like Donald Trump. I think he's very rude. I was like, that's one way of putting it. He's a rude guy, no doubt about that. And then I couldn't, I had to, at this point, I'm just like, all right, well, I'll tell you what. I'm a 1,000,001%. I'm a Bernie guy, 100%. And both of them actually looked at me and they were like, he's obviously a decent man. He's definitely clear. Like she said, that's a good choice. And what was but they're very likely not going to vote, either of those folks. I could, they are not. And then, we talked about a million other things and we left it at that. But we talked enough to know that life is not easy, And I think that the terrible catch-22 of our kind of politics that relies on mobilizing new people, whether it be Bernie Sanders nationally, whether it be you in Brooklyn, whether it be someone maybe like in the Ozarks, there is that commonality of people who are out of the system and for every type of reason imaginable, from structural racism to class to whatever, they're out. They're on the receiving end. That a lot of them, I feel, might not be mobilized until something actually happens. Yeah. And then that's the catch-22, because in order for something to happen, well, voting, I don't think it's just voting, but voting is helpful. Having you in Congress is a big goddamn difference. Having Bernie Sanders as president is a big goddamn difference. So as you're out, I mean, that's a long preamble, so take as long as you want. I know that part of your vision. You look at the congressional map, you think there's several 100,000 people in this district. What, 9,000 people are voting? By math, you could win this thing in a landslide. If you got 30,000 human beings to say, I trust this person to be there for me, what's the barrier to doing that? And how are you addressing that?
The barrier to doing it is, there's a lot of different things that make up the barrier. One is money, time, the areas you choose to go to, because our district is very, very, very diverse, but it's very segregated. You know what I mean? Like literally certain lines determine thousands of dollars in different income. Yep. I mean, so those are the barriers. How we do that is, listen, if folks know about me, they know I'm a veteran. Nobody's going to outwork me. You know what I mean? So like you said, Bernie Sanders needs to mobilize new people, and he hasn't done that in a sense. Bernie Sanders, instead of holding a rally in Queens, should hold a rally in Crown Heights. He should hold a rally in Flatbush and East Flatbush, because there's so many people who are just dejected with the system. Like, it doesn't work for me. But obviously, the message that Bernie Sanders puts out resonates with people. But when you show up in those spaces and you are in those spaces, people can see, wow, he's not just sending surrogates out here. He's here. So maybe I should get off my ass and get mobilized and go vote so I can actually change the system. Listen, your vote matters. If it didn't matter, Republicans wouldn't be trying so hard to keep you from using it.
There it is.
Nobody breaks into your house and steals a toothbrush. They steal the valuable thing.
That's right.
Republicans are trying to steal the valuable thing. They get it. And Barack Obama, who was a centrist, but for all of his centrist policies, scared the hell out of the Republican Party, because they actually saw for the first time, oh shit, young people, people of color are actually voting, and he won in a landslide. They had never seen that before. So that's when they started, like, we can't let any of them vote. So going into those spaces, that is the main thing. Meeting voters where they are. You know, whether it's Flatbush Avenue, Utica, Nostrand, Rogers, I'm over there. So instead of just talking to the affluent person in Park Slope, I'm talking to the dude who's standing in front of the Golden Crust with Jordans on and a hoodie on, because he looks just like me. Because I'm sitting here right now in a hoodie, but I'm still a congressional candidate. But most people who run for office look at that guy, he's not a triple prime voter. They're probably scared of him, so they walk right by him. But no, come here, young brother. Let me tell you why this is so important. Let me tell you that there are thousands of people who died for this right. There's thousands of people who sacrificed to get you to where you are. So do not squander this right. You have to exercise it, because guess what? You may not like politics. Politics surely loves you. I defy you right now to tell me any aspect of your life that's not involved in politics, even the religion you practice, because we have a First Amendment that says you can practice it or you can be free from it. The clothes you wear came from somewhere. The drink that I'm drinking was inspected by the FDA. Everything in this room that we're in was manufactured. There was a tax on it. That was a political decision. Everything you do is a political decision. So guess what? If something is going to control every part or have a say in every part of your life, you damn well better have a say in it.
Oh, that's just perfectly put. I love that. I want that to be replicated and sent and sent and sent. All right. So just two more questions. One is, what about the conflict inside, basically, I mean, I think it manifests in a lot of different ways, but for purposes of this, inside Black politics, inside Brooklyn politics, inside Caribbean politics. The difference basically being between, and this is where it mirrors capitalism, and this is the Adolph Reed thing, right? Okay, I'm Yvette Clarke. I represent capital interests. I'm at home in capital across all racial boundaries. That's what I do. The exchange you get with me as a constituent is that you get to see someone that looks like you in Congress, and that's about it. And I'm sure there's, other constituency services and so on. And then the new argument of, obviously that's important, but we don't just want to have a brokerage machine. We actually need to deliver actual power. Yeah. And then paradoxically, by delivering actual power, it is the way that you deliver most for your community, but then also nationalize what everybody's doing, because there is the 99 to 1% dimension as well.
So like my grandmother, who always used to say, all skin folk ain't kinfolk. And a lot of Black politicians use their Blackness as a buttress against any kind of criticism. Yeah. You know what I mean? So yes, I want to see more Black women in power. I come from a Black woman's loins. My mother is a Black woman. My sisters are Black women. My wife is Afro-Latina. She's Puerto Rican. So yes, I want to see more women of color in power, more women in power, more marginalized people in power. But when you get that position of power, you have an absolute duty to do your best for the people who you hope to represent or who you are representing. A congressional representative is literally the voice of the community. They take those troubles and needs to the halls of Congress. And if you have not been doing that for the last 14 years, then there's only two things. There's only two avenues that you can occupy. Either you don't know what the hell's going on, and that is a shame. You've been in office for 14 years and you don't know the condition of our community, or you just don't give a damn. Either way, it is far time for you to go. Because if you've had that long, and like I said, income inequality, racism. There's a damn police car on every corner in Crown Heights. There's none in Park Slope. Why is that? Because nobody speaks out about these things. When Bloomberg was so happy-go-lucky with stop and frisk, where was Yvette Clarke? When Bloomberg was so happy to bring all these developers in, where was Yvette Clarke? She championed some of these damn things. She championed the Barclays Center. The four harbingers of gentrification are down there. There's a Whole Foods, there's an Apple, there's a Chipotle, and there's a Starbucks. You see those four things in your community, it's no longer affordable to live. So she championed these things. So she hurt the community. And like I said, I want to see women in power. Trust me. But we are at a precipice in this country where we cannot just have vapid people filling seats. We need people who are going to actually do the work. So, excuse me, any policy that I would put forth, I would think back to 8-year-old Isiah, when I used to have to grab ketchup out of McDonald's, when we get slapped in the back of a U-Haul because we got evicted out of our house. Not because my parents were lazy. Both of them worked because we couldn't afford it. So anything that I put forth policy-wise, will it hurt 8-year-old Isiah? If it will, then I know it will hurt people in my community, and I won't do it.
That's it. It's as simple as that. How can people help you?
What did OJ say? Money, money, money. Okay. No, we got
probably not the guy you want to quote. Can
not
I just
OJ, the OJs.
Okay. I misheard you. I totally misheard you.
Oh, man.
I was about to say, let me
not
put
OJ
on my
Simpson.
Political advisory hat for a second. The OJs. Money, money, money. Okay. All right. Fair enough.
Not OJ Simpson, bro. I'm not going with OJ Simpson. No. If I were to kill somebody, no. We need. Well,
actually, you want a little more Bill Clinton?
No.
He said no.
I'm good. Him and Joe Biden are responsible for the crime bill, so they can both,
Yeah, that's right. Well, what if he was like, what if I was on Jeffrey Epstein's island? It's my new book.
Billionaire just winds up dead when he's supposed to be on suicide watch. I don't get it. But see. Keep your third eye open, everybody. I don't get it. Yeah, I truly don't get it.
It's like, well, there's a funding crisis at Rikers Island or in the city prison system.
So what do we need? We need to raise $10,000 in the next 30 days, and I'll tell folks why. So right now we're in the petitioning phase of the campaign, collecting signatures from registered voters in the district in order to get on the ballot. A trick incumbents like to do is they like to sue challengers and invalidate your signatures to knock you off the ballot. So we're gearing up for a legal challenge that we know it's coming because she doesn't want me sitting next to her on a debate stage. And once the ballot's set, debates are set. So she would have to answer for all these things we talked about. She doesn't want that, so she's going to sue us to try to knock us off the ballot. So we need folks to, even if it's $5, $10, that stuff matters. It truly, truly matters. We need folks to donate as much as they can. If you can be a reoccurring donor of $3 a month, trust me, that truly helps. We need volunteers. We have right now about 200 volunteers on the campaign. Yeah, I mean, last weekend we went out with 35 volunteers collecting signatures. We were out there today again collecting signatures, knocking on doors, talking to voters. So we can always use more volunteers and donations. All of this stuff, my whole policy platform, because we didn't get through a tenth of all the stuff I have on my website, is Isiah for Congress, ISIAH. forcongress.com. Same social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Folks can follow me. I tweet. I'm not here to offend anybody, but I will always speak truth to power. And if something needs to be called out, that's one thing the military taught me is take charge in the absence of leadership. I don't care if you are the lowest ranking private. If you're the person, if everybody else goes down in front of you, you're now in charge. So you damn well better know what to do when you get there. And we have folks right now who are just asleep at the wheel. So that's what the military taught me, and that's what we're doing right now. We're trying to take charge in the absence of leadership because we don't have any leadership. We have people just filling seats. We have people who are more concerned with keeping the job than they are with doing the job, and that's hurting people in my community, and that's hurting people all around this country. So if folks can donate, retweet, follow, like, share, everything, I'd be much appreciated.
You got your marching orders, and seriously, this is important. This is a really, really important campaign. Isiah James, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, bro. This is I'm in the studio. I don't normally go to studios.
First of many.
I live in a studio, but it ain't this. It's tiny ass apartment. So,
and just to be clear, this is Majority Report studio. We're not, TMBS is not a swank yet, as he makes it sound like we're sitting in a caviar lounge. Okay, folks.
Suppose somebody over there with a smoking jacket.
That's Alfred. He brings a scotch after the show.
Yeah. And you swill it.
We swill this. I thought that was a really good birdie advocacy. Can I have my smoking culture, Alfred? Yeah. When Brexit happens, Brexit finally goes through, we're going to go over there and buy a castle.
We're not going to get on Brexit because I can talk all about that.
You'll be back on.
Absolutely.
Folks, patreon.com/TMBS. Become a patron. Subscribe if you haven't already, obviously. Spread the word. We appreciate all of you. Tomorrow is a think tank. Next show is on Wednesday. We're still on a slightly different schedule with Adolph Reed and Liz Franzik. And we keep going. We'll see you in Austin and Boston. Become a patron, patreon.com/TMBS. You can find the links to Ahmed Kaballo, Isiah James in the show description. For the postgame, Napoleon the Legend is joining us. Become a patron. Peace and love.